Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Tuesday, November 18th, 2025. Right-wing media shrugs off latest Epstein document release. What do thousands of pages of newly released material reveal about the well-documented relationship between convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and President Donald Trump? Not much of anything, according to some right-wing influencers who have long been clamoring for the government to release more information about Epstein and his crimes. To me, these are nothing burgers, even if they're even real. Pro-Trump podcaster John Harold said on his Badlands Media Rumble live stream on Wednesday. Harold gained an audience in the wake of the 2020 election after spreading QAnon-adjacent conspiracy theories. His fellow Badlands media personality, Brian Lupo, took a slightly different view on his own live stream this week. The emails didn't exactly say nothing, he claimed, but they show that Trump was informing on Epstein and his associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was serving a 20-year prison term for helping Epstein sexually abuse underage girls. Epstein died by suicide while in jail during the first Trump administration. My take on this: Epstein and Maxwell are trying to figure out who's a mole or a rat or an informant in their circle of friends, Lupo said, referring to an email in which Epstein called Trump a dog that didn't bark. The White House has denied that Trump was an informant. Epstein looms large for many conspiracy theorists, including QAnon believers. He's seen as a prime example of the satanic cabal of pedophiles they believe are entrenched among the world's most powerful people. QAnon adherents think Donald Trump is destined to defeat that cabal. Trump has acknowledged that he and Epstein were once friendly, but fell out decades ago. He's denied any knowledge of Epstein trafficking of underage girls. While one of the newly released emails suggests Trump did know about Epstein's behavior, some right-wing media figures say the new disclosures prove Trump did nothing wrong. They're claiming it's a hoax. They're claiming that the Democrats are cherry-picking the things that make Trump look the worst, and that these things prove that he didn't actually do anything wrong, and that he's not a criminal, and that he was actually gathering information for the FBI on Epstein, said Mike Rothschild, an independent journalist and author who has written extensively about conspiracy theories and QAnon. He said that is very different from the story they were singing years before that, which is that if we just bring down the Epstein ring, all the Democrats are going to go down with him. More prominent Democrats are communicating with Epstein in the newly released emails. Still, another common thread on the right is that the release is a distraction by Democrats. They think that the Epstein thing is something that is going to distract you from their failures. Although the Epstein thing, all it's really doing is exposing more Democrat failures. Vince Colognes, a radio host and the editorial director of the Daily Caller, said on his Rumble live stream on Thursday. That echoes President Trump's Truth Social posts, accusing Democrats of using Epstein to deflect from fallout over the government shutdown. On Friday, he called on the Justice Department to investigate Democrats mentioned in the emails. Attorney General Pam Bondi said she was appointed to federal prosecutor to lead a probe. Meanwhile, some prominent influencers and conservative media outlets are essentially ignoring this week's release of documents. They already know that their fans are on board 100% with whatever Trump does, Rothschild said. There's nothing for them here. At the same time, the emails are fueling new speculation on both the right and to the left as people race to interpret Epstein's often cryptic language. To Rothschild, that is a fool's errand. Jeffrey Epstein was not the most trustworthy person. You're taking him at his word because you want to believe him when he says things that are either good about Trump or bad about Trump, he said. It's absolutely maddening circular discourse, and it gets us absolutely nowhere. CPB agrees to revive $36 million deal with NPR, killed after Trump's pressure. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting agreed Monday to fulfill a $36 million multi-year contract with NPR that it yanked after pressure from the Trump White House. The arrangement resolves litigation filed by NPR accusing the corporation of illegally yielding to Trump's demands that the network he financially punished for its news coverage. The argument, part of a broader lawsuit by NPR and several stations against the Trump administration, focused on CPB funding for NPR's operation of a satellite distribution system for local public radio stations. The judge in the case had explicitly told CPB's legal team he did not find its defense credible. CPB lawyers had argued that the decision to award the contract to a new consortium of public media institutions was driven by a desire to foster digital innovations more swiftly. In its submission Monday evening to the court, CPB did not concede that it had acted wrongfully, nor that it yielded to political pressure from the administration. Federal subsidies for public broadcasting stopped on October 1st as a result of a party-line vote over the summer by Congress, called a rescission. Only a skeleton crew remains at CPB, which was created as a non-profit corporation more than a half-century ago to funnel federal subsidies to public media. While PBS has had layoffs and NPR is monitoring its own finances, many local stations across the country have been hit hard. Over the course of the litigation this fall, mounting evidence appeared to demonstrate that CPB's board chair and executives had acted against NPR in what turned out to be a futile attempt to salvage the corporation's own future. In hearings last month in Washington, D.C., U.S. District Court Judge Randolph Moss told CPB's legal team they had not made a credible case for why the corporation reneged on the contract just a day after a top White House official warned senior CPB leaders against doing business with NPR. A trial had been set to start on December 1st. CBP's change of mind and NPR's ensuing lawsuit sparked consternation and unease within a larger public media ecosystem. The two organizations had served as partners for decades, but the relationship frayed earlier this year as the system came under attack from the Trump administration. Trump's public campaign against NPR and PBS started in earnest soon after he returned to the White House Trump kicked it into higher gear in late March with a series of social media posts. In early April, CPB leaders sought to get money out of the door before Trump took action against public media. On April 2nd, CBB's board door, before Trump took action against public media, approved the extension of a contract with NPR to distribute public radio programs, including those not produced by NPR. The arrangement stretched back 4 decades. The amount included millions still due on the then current contract. The next day, CPB's board chair and 2 senior executives met with a top White House budget official who attested to her intense dislike for NPR. The budget official told them CPB didn't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. According to a disposition from the CBP executive, Clayton Barsow, submitted as part of NPR's legal filings. And the day after that, just 48 hours after the board vote, CPB reversed itself. CPB executive Kathy Merritt informed NPR's top official over the satellite and distribution services that it had to be spun off. It could not be part of NPR. NPR refused to do so. CPB revised the scope of the contract and solicited new bids. NPR's submission proved unsuccessful. Meanwhile, the White House was ramping up the pressure. It accused NPR and PBS of bias. On April 14th, for example, it issued a formal statement that called their offerings radical, woke propaganda disguised as news. NPR and PBS chief executives have rejected the accusations of bias. On May 1st, Trump issued an executive order that no federal money should go to the 2 public broadcasting networks, NPR and 3 Colorado public radio stations, then filed suit against the White House, saying they were unlawfully punishing because the president did not like their news coverage. They contended the executive order represented a violation of First Amendment protections. Their suit names CPB as a defendant, as well for their characterization bending to the president's will in Monday's legal filings. CPB agreed that the executive order was precisely the sort of government interference that Congress sought to prevent in establishing CPB as it did. In the summer, Republican leaders in the U.S. Congress, urged on by Trump, pulled back all $1.1 billion for future public broadcasting that had already been approved and signed into law by the president. Throughout the legal battle, NPR has said, regardless of the outcome of the case, it would work with the contract winner, a consortium of public radio organizations called Public Media Infrastructure, to ensure the satellite and distribution system functioned properly. With the settlement in place, CPB is nonetheless pressing ahead with that contract. NPR's broader constitutional case against Trump's executive order purporting to ban federal funding of public media continues. A hearing on its merits is scheduled for December. Under RFK Jr., the CDC is scrutinizing the childhood vaccine schedule. A toddler gets the MMR vaccine at a vaccine clinic in Lubbock, Texas, during the measles outbreak in that state earlier this year. For decades, babies have been wincing, squirming, and crying their way through a series of vaccinations that start as soon as they are born. The shots protect against diseases such as diphtheria, tetanus, and mumps, which once plagued children and their parents. When I was a kid, my parents were terrified of my catching polio or measles or whatever, and friends of mine died, says Dr. Stanley Plotkin, a veteran vaccine scientist who is now 93 and a professor emeritus of the University of Pennsylvania. A parent today very likely does not worry about his or her child dying of an infectious disease, he adds. That's because routine childhood vaccinations largely vanquished many diseases, making vaccines one of medicine's greatest triumphs. But Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has long questioned the safety and effectiveness of many vaccines. And President Trump recently called for big changes in how children get vaccinated. They pump so much stuff into those beautiful little babies. It's a disgrace. I don't see it. I think it's very bad, Trump said recently at a White House event. It looks like they're pumping into a horse. So a powerful Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Committee, handpicked by Kennedy, is now scrutinizing the childhood vaccine schedule. The sequence of more than 30 doses to protect against more than a dozen diseases. The move is being welcomed by some advocates, physicians, and scientists. I think it's true that any vaccine schedule should periodically be assessed, says Dr. Offer Levy, a vaccine scientist at Harvard. As we like to say, Moses did not come down from Mount Sinai saying this will be the only way to immunize. But others worry the review is part of Kennedy's campaign against vaccines. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has for 20 years been an anti-vaccine activist and science denialist. You would have hoped that when he was confirmed as Secretary of Health and Human Services, he would have taken on his job, which is to protect the health of children in his country, but he didn't, says Dr. Paul Offit, who runs the Vaccine Education Center at the Children's Education Hospital. Education Center at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. All he cares about is making vaccines less available, less affordable, and more feared. Federal officials did not respond to NPR's question about a possible overhaul of the childhood vaccine schedule. The scrutiny is especially troubling to many public health authorities. Coming amid new outbreaks of disease like measles and whooping cough, these on the rise, becoming a falling immunization rates. Offit and others say every vaccine is meticulously evaluated before being added to the schedule, and researchers and regulators continually monitor all vaccines. All the data and evidence suggests that our vaccine schedule is incredibly safe and incredibly effective. Dr. Yvonne Maldonado, a pediatric infectious disease expert at Stanford University. In fact, it's probably the most effective vaccine schedule in the world. Kids get this roster of shots at a young age to make sure they don't catch dangerous diseases when they're most vulnerable, Maldonado and others say. Some people who are worried about vaccines argue the number of different antigens and other ingredients could overwhelm a child's immune system. But babies' immune systems can handle it, says Maldonado and other scientists. Children are exposed to far more stimulation naturally from microbes than from vaccines. And vaccines have been refined over the decades to minimize the number of ingredients they contain. There are about 170 different components in the various shots in today's vaccine schedule, Offit says. Which is actually less than the vaccines that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and I got as children in the early 1950s, Offit says. Experts are especially alarmed by the CDC as investigating splitting up the MMR vaccine, which protects kids against measles, mumps, and rubella in one shot. Giving kids 3 separate shots would mean more trips to the doctor and more needles, vaccine proponents like Offit say. They worry that inevitably more kids would end up missing vaccines, and it would take years to develop new individual shots, according to the proponents. Dr. Jesse Goodman, a vaccine expert at Georgetown University who used to regulate vaccines at the FDA, says, "It's as if you had this really winning football team, and you said, well, gee, we're winning. We win every season. We win every game. Let's change everything we're doing." Marjorie Taylor Greene says Trump policies are not America first in fight over MAGA. President Trump arrives after being greeted by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene to address a joint session of Congress at the Capitol in Washington on March 4th. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, once one of President Trump's strongest supporters in Congress, called his foreign policies not America First positions, and said his recent attacks against her can put my life in danger. Greene and Trump have traded barbs in last few days over the future of the Make America Great Again movement, raising new questions about the president's firm grip on the Republican Party. On Friday, Trump withdrew his endorsement of the Georgia lawmaker, calling her wacky and claiming Greene's recent criticism was all about his refusal to support her future political ambitions. On Saturday, Trump called her a traitor in a social media post. "He called me a traitor, and that is so extremely wrong," Greene said during an interview on the CNN State of the Union with Dana Bash on Sunday. "And those were the types of words used that can radicalize people against me and put my life in danger." When asked about her previous attacks against political opponents, such as in 2020 when she posted an image of a gun alongside a group of progressive Democratic congresswomen, Greene apologized. "I think that's fair criticism," Greene said, "and I would like to say humbly, I'm sorry for taking part in the toxic politics. It's very bad for our country." During the extensive interview, Greene also criticized Trump's recent defense of the H-1B visa program, which lets companies sponsor foreign-born workers for skilled labor. During a Tuesday Fox News interview, Trump said the U.S. has to bring this talent, and he said the country doesn't have enough of it. Those are not America First positions, Green said on Sunday, before voicing displeasure for his frequent foreign trips. And continuing to really travel all over the world doesn't help Americans back at home. I said this to him, and I will say it out loud, I would love to see Air Force One be parked and stay home. Despite her break with Trump, local GOP leadership in Georgia's 14th congressional district are standing with Green. Recent national criticism directed at Congresswoman Green does not change the fundamental truth that she serves at the direction of the people of the district. Chairman Jim Tully posted on Facebook Saturday, while the President of the United States represents a nation as a whole, Congresswoman Green represents the people of Northwest Georgia. And she has done so with clarity, resolve, and integrity. This public rift between Green and Trump marks a brewing fissure in the GOP. When asked what caused the break, Green pointed to the battle over releasing documents tied to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Unfortunately, it has all come down to the Epstein files, and that is shocking, Green said. The Georgia lawmaker said she doesn't believe Trump is implicated in these files. The House of Representatives is set to vote on the release of the documents related to investigations of Epstein this week, after enough members signed a discharge petition brought by Representative Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie. On ABC News Sunday, Massie warned his fellow Republicans that voting against the release of the files would stain their long-term political futures, even if Trump attacks them in the short term. In 2030, he's not going to be president, and you will have voted to protect pedophiles, Massie said. The record of this vote will last longer than Donald Trump's presidency.